our next part will be the discussion of the biodiversity message, which is displayed over here. If you haven't done so yet, you can also scan with your phone the QR code and you have it on your phone. You can also, and we will have it also displayed over here. There is already a draft which the organizers of this workshop have been drafting. And now our challenge is to improve this message and think about that it's not only Italian specific, but pan-alpine. So think about the whole Alpine area. And when you read those sentences that have been drafted by us, what can be improved, what should be maybe even deleted, or is there something that isn't there at all? So it's also possible to add some new sentences. But before we start with your inputs, and you should really say whatever comes to your mind. It's a free speech area here. But before that, to have like a more round view about the Alpine area, we have two small inputs prepared. The first one is from Rachele Stenela from the USALP Action Group 6. And maybe she can come on stage if she's here. Yes, there she is. Yes. There's another thing. If you want to say something, you always have to come to stage because there's the camera and we are streaming and people want to watch. So there's no microphone going around. You have to come to the microphone, unfortunately. So, yes.
Scusate, solo una cosa, un aspetto. Just one thing, sorry. I've been told that now you will be given a paper in which they will try to to check who is coming for dinner. So please, of course, do not distract and keep focused on what you will hear, but in the same time you have to fill the paper. No, sorry, they're not ready, so never mind. Good afternoon, everyone. I haven't prepared any presentation, but upon invitation of the moderators, I wanted to provide you with a different point of view because in the round table of Group 6, the situation I represent, which is called semi-rural area, so it focused on this type of safeguard. We deal with the coordination of the safeguard of this biodiversity. We've seen this morning as there is no independent country if we talk about biodiversity. And this also applies to agrobiodiversity. What I would like to offer you as an input is what type of sustainable use we can imagine for the natural resources in the Alps. A colleague from Austria said before, we have to use an approach that goes beyond border, also because each state, according to the conventions that we mentioned this morning of 1992, is responsible for the natural, especially because since 1992, the genetic resources start to be heritage of each nation. So at the macro regional level, it is important that each single state implement actions in order to use in a sustainable way these resources. Also because the challenges through the Alpine areas we know are very similar, because during the last 50 years, the negative impact and the abandonment of some areas is something that is common to the whole Alpine area. So I'm thinking about the plans on the pasture areas So even the alpine area needs its genetic resource and animals, and the research has to work on this direction because it has its specificity. So if we want to answer to the challenge of climate change and reduce this and reduce the use of water, we have to work in this direction, and we must make sure that also agriculture is in line with this type of agro biodiversity, favors the cohabitation with other species already mentioned in the previous speeches. So especially in the areas of natural parks, the cohabitation between species and also amongst the local variety, it's fundamental. So what we propose is a dynamic approach that goes beyond the single conservation of the single species. And to do so, I think that this is the first aspect, the construction of a multi-stakeholder platform that see political head, but also local players seated at the same table to favor the dialogue. Today, probably what we miss are the farmers, those who really implement these things. But I think that with the project, we are all working in this direction. My question is how to do it, because for us it's very difficult how to involve them. We try to do a participated research, so not in the station but directly on the field together with the farmers, but it is more and more difficult and challenging.
Thank you very much. There is one last short input from another perspective, which comes from the Zebra Youth Council, namely by Lorenz Bechtum. Please come to stage.
Good afternoon. I'm Lorenz Bechtum, and I'm part of the Zebra Youth Council. Zebra is an organ which, like, they try to promote sustainable development and also the protection of the Alps. And I'm part of the Youth Council, so we collaborate with them and attend international meetings and give and bring a youth perspective into the organization. I'm also studying environmental engineering in Torino, and so the inputs I can give to this workshop round are that I think that we need to see nature and biodiversity as allies and not as objects we can exploit without limits or as obstacles we need to confine and combat. In fact, driving them to collapse will have very negative impacts on ourselves, and instead respecting, collaborating, and protecting them leads also to many economical and health benefits for us humans, as we heard this morning. An example I've learned of is an organic rice producer in the Piedmont region in Italy, which has planted on parts of their fields field flowers and also trees to attract pollinators and other animals, enhancing like this biodiversity and also pollination. The birds which are present thanks to the planted trees, they serve also as pest control and make like this pesticides even more unnecessary. And as you can see, there is a mutual benefit for nature and us humans implementing these nature-based solutions. Another good example are urban parks. They not only reduce the urban heat island effect in cities, but also increment biodiversity in towns and can serve as ecological corridors. International ecological corridors, moreover, are very important not only for animal migration, but also for plant migration. and this enables plants and like trees also to more efficiently adapt to climate change. Nature-based solutions in general are very efficient in conservation of biodiversity and in climate change adaptation. For example, also like riverbed renaturalization and also broadening is very important to prevent flooding, and is also like also planting forests or reforestation is a good practice to prevent floods and droughts, and also in the like focusing on the alpine region is also very useful to prevent landslides and lavines. And thinking also about another argument we tackled this morning, controlling invasive species, also their nature-based solutions perhaps are less invasive than other solutions, and for example, invasive species could also be controlled by specific animal species which could be introduced without harming the ecosystem. To conclude, I want to state that I agree with what the speaker from LIPU this morning said, that really like we need to, that biodiversity can only really be protected, and if a paradigm shift happens, and this paradigm shift is that we not only need to consider biodiversity in human intervention, but also really put it at the core basis of our interventions, which interact with territory and landscape planning. Because if we really collaborate with biodiversity and nature, in that way, we have, like, this is very advantageous for us, as we heard many examples this morning and this afternoon also. And like this, we really can also protect biodiversity and nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorenz. Now we're coming to the discussion part. So we have on this slide the first 3 of 6 points we have already drafted from the biodiversity message. And this message is something we want to put out in the world after this workshop as a conclusion. So if there is something already that's on your mind, please feel free to tell it to us. And if there is something on specific points on this message, please also. So I guess there is something that has triggered speeches in your mind. So I want to open now the panel to everybody to help us to shape this message. So anybody there? Any thoughts about it? Not really? Yes, please.
Hello, parlo in italiano o in italiano?
Shall I speak Italian? Okay, this is Giulio Conte. I'm a staff advisor, sub-consultant as regards the ecology of rivers. I'm a biologist. I tackle with the management of water and water basins. I wanted to thank you of catchment areas, water reservoirs. And this is a very insightful day. And I think that I've perceived a little bit of contrast. For example, the first messages that I read, on the one hand, we wanted the market, the business to go towards a certain directors. And on the other, we would like agriculture's farmers to do something, to implement some actions. If we want them to do these actions, and we want the market to be the one that that implement these actions, we need to find a way. Actually, everyone knows that this has already been underway thanks to the PAC, the policy of agriculture on the European level. These experiences that you showed us are very interesting. I think that we have 2 or 3 different levels here. On the one hand, some very specific and accurate needs, single individual species, individual habitats, 60 hectares of all the habitats in Lombardy. It seems to be so little, but actually these are important areas in which we need government funds. It's up to the region, it's up to the state, or it's up to the EU to spend some resources to try to protect these hotspots, let's call them these ways. And then we have the theme that relates to the mountains. And I think that here the problem is not just trying to comply with the ecological processes that would lead us to transform, to convert all the grasslands into woods. What we want to happen is to counteract a natural phenomenon. This is quite peculiar, because if this is the natural area that relates to woods, we should allow woods to grow there, but this is not the case. We want to protect a specific landscape that is preserved by the human beings, by the human kinds, but these kinds, these landscapes are so interesting also from a tourist point of view, that a business-oriented approach in this way, for example, like the EUMA experience, could work here in this kind of context. You know that the first experience, because we talk a lot about ecosystem services, but we talked so little about payments. The most important experience are the most easier things where it's possible to trigger some market mechanism that allow us to preserve some habitats, because that kind of client, of user, of visitor, of tourist has a possibility, has a purchasing power. So we can work on it. Experts, ecology of fauna and flora experts are not enough. We need people that are able to understand how to implement policies. And over there, we need to do a lot. There is still a lot to do. As regards Lombardy, I'm not from Lombardy, but I've been here in Lombardy a lot for several years, is the topic of the natural landscapes in plain lands, in lowlands, not in the mountains. I'm one of the founding members of the Italian Center for River Restorations. And for sure, here, for the sake of the restoration of the ecosystems, citing the river ecosystems as one of the nature-based solution. To do so, we need to sacrifice a little bit of our agricultural soil. We need to displace, we need to move the crops to the nature. And this means we need to have some erosion zones, some areas that could be flooded. These, from a conceptual point of view, are difficult to be digested from the common citizen. In the short term, we need to train the technicians that tackle the hydraulic risk, the water risk, and we need to build some projects that nowadays are legiferate, are governed. We call them integrated processes, and those one both facilitate the water land, the waterways directive, as well as the floods directive. This is very difficult, but when I'm discussing about the short term, I'm talking about 20, 30 years, not less than these time horizon. Over the long run, I guess this was you talking about the farm to fork strategy. We need to change as a whole. I think that we need to consume 90% less in terms of animal based proteins, because the problem here is that in order to find some lands to be allocated, to be assigned to nature, we need to use the remaining parts of the lands, of the soil, to feed the humankind. You know, there is a 10 factor when the primary deadlines of productivity, when we feed ourselves. So this is the forward-looking strategy, and we are speaking about hundreds and hundreds of years, but European policy should go towards the direction engage high precision agriculture techniques, but in order to produce for the human beings, and we should allocate parts of the territory to our nature.
Covered a lot of things. I was also thinking of, like, just some punch words I noted. Like the touristic approach is something we should really focus on, although it can be dangerous for nature, but it can also be beneficial for nature if you choose an environmental touristic approach. Also, the word soil and erosion is a big topic right now in the Alps when you think about erosions, because forests are breaking down, which we have, for example, in Austrian Alps. It's a big problem, and there comes also something into play, which Lawrence also mentioned, which is the nature-based solution. So we need to have healthy forests, biodiverse forests with multiple species in it. So if there is something like a beetle that destroys one species, there are still other species that covers this forest, and the erosion can be prevented. Also, the risk of floods and water is something that is tackled by nature-based solutions by allowing rivers to flow more freely. And this is something we have to do a lot more in the Alps, because there are a lot of rivers in the Alps that are really caged, I would say. And the last thing is also like the food and crops we are building, because I don't know the numbers for Italy, but in Austria, half of the crops we are building are just for feeding animals. So just imagine everybody's vegetarian, half the land would be free for biodiversity. So there are a lot of things I forgot to mention, we have some note takers here. So they're writing what we are saying, so we can incorporate it into the message, which we will be discussing tomorrow. So there was a lot of good thoughts. Thank you very much. Something else you are thinking of? Is there something? We heard a lot of good approaches right now. When you think about conservation in the Alps, what is really needed to enforce it? What is needed in the Alps when you think of an Alps-wide perspective, conservation of populations, conservation of different species? Anything or nothing? Yes, please. You can come in front if you want. So it's easy for me because of the translation. I'm sorry.
Ok. Sorry. Più che conservazione,
Rather than conservation, I think that we should discuss about co-living, cohabitation among, I'm sorry, among different species. So in my view, we should try to find a solution, we should try to propose a solution in order to make that the role of the human being as a species in the alpine space could get back to cohabitate, could co-live with the species that we were discussing about all these days. So which are the tools that we need to deploy? Well, I proposed some of them earlier, but for sure agriculture plays an important role here. Conservation of some species must be seen by redesigning the agricultural model, but also our society model, because they should go hand in hand, as well as the role of research, because I'm sorry, I'm an agronomist technician, so I was thinking about agronomist techniques, but of course, I'm open to any kind of input from these room attendees. But for example, as regarded Federica's speech this morning relating to biodiversity, for example, in the rice crops, in the rice crop soils, the role of the agronomist techniques is paramount. For example, the sowing season can affect the survival of a species over another. So I think that what should we put in our take-home message as regards some solution in the space of the Alps? Maybe I didn't give you any clear answer, I know that, but for sure, creating a solid and sound platform among research techniques and innovative solutions starting from tradition that build on tradition but innovate tradition, as well as involvement of the stakeholders, of all the players. I'm sorry if I've been too much vague and generic.
Thank you very much. Taking this, the platform you mentioned is something that goes in the direction of cross-border conservation. I think there's still the need for more communication between the countries of the Alps when it comes to research, when it comes to conservation of corridors. That's really something we should enhance because the species don't care about the borders. And also the traditional methods is also something we should revive and remember again. Is there something else? Yes, please.
Sì, salve a tutti, sono Claudio Celada della Lepo.
Good evening, everyone. This is Claudio Celata from Lepo. Today, very often the debate went towards the cohabiting, the co-living with other species of multiple usage, of multiple usage of the territories, and this is fine, this is good, but I would like also to report, to refocus everything on the role of protection, because if we look at the targets of the European biodiversity strategy, I'm referring especially to targets that relates to 30% of protected areas and 10% of strictly protected areas. Or, for example, what Laura Petiti told us this morning as regarding the first objective of the nationwide strategy for biodiversity, namely the strengthening of the protected areas. We should also be aware of the fact that sometimes we need to say no. Sometimes we need to say, because cohabiting with some sectors that play a role also in terms of active management of the territory is one thing, but raising a white flag saying that some integral areas within the Alps can no longer exist. We shouldn't raise our white flag. We shouldn't surrender. I'm referring to one of the action that has been envisaged by the SNAP project that we are going to tackle, namely the idea to integrate to mainstream the ecological network here in Lombardy by detecting some climate shelters. Once we have detected such climate shelters, such areas that are going to still be shelters from an ecological point of view, also in front of extreme events. We cannot waive, we cannot areas, these kind of territories. We are speaking about grasslands in the Alps. This is a very, this is a habitat that is totally under threat. Of course, the grazer grasslands will have a role in maintaining these habitats, but we need to say no as regards some extra requests, for example, some ski stations or something that see the Alps as a very big fair, a very big fancy fair, where the idea of keeping some intact spaces is always being put aside. So I think that this objective falls within the project that we are about to kick off, which merit is that this is going to last for during 9 years. And I think that us, being the scientific community, should play a role, and we should enhance, we should insist on this message, because this is one of the most important messages of the European Union as well as of the Alps Convention. So this was my insight, my message. Thank you. Thank you very much, Claudio, because he has just reiterated something that maybe we take for granted, but we shouldn't do this. We shouldn't take nothing for granted, because maybe we think that in the protected area here in Lombardy, there could be the possibility we should protect. We must protect these areas. So this is their first and foremost purpose, but we should always reiterate this. And maybe we should pay attention to these requests, to these insights, even though this is common to all of us. And it's very good to put it down in writing, to put everything down in writing, even if on a digital support. If there are no further remarks, I think. Okay, Giuliana? Yes, of course, you can come here. Yes, Giuliana, the floor is yours. Good morning, everyone. I'm Giuliana Cavalli. I work at EarthStuff. I'm a naturalist expert. Something that I would like to tell you is not just conservation, but this relates to communication. in order to step in, we need to persuade all the stakeholders about what we have been doing. And we need to do this with a comprehensible language, because very often we make communication, but with a language that is not always understood properly. And this is the case that when we ask how many of you know Rete Natura 2000, lots of people reply, we don't know it. We don't know Rete Natura 2000. So this is a self-criticism that I would like to move. Need a greater efforts to communicate biodiversity, to communicate its benefits, its relevant benefits, and we need to go there on site, on the field, reaching out, trying to construct, trying to build a dialogue on these topics. Also with a language that should be nearer to farmers, to agriculture people. For example, a farmer leaves his house at 5 a.m. and gets back at his home at 7 p.m. He cannot hold meetings in the morning because they are working in the first hours of the morning. So we need to find some ways that are supportive to the people that work on the field. We need to try to find a way to communicate properly in order to implement actions that we want to implement.
It's two motivational speeches that we should really fight for conservation and fight for every species, every habitat in the Alps, because we are responsible for this really precious landscape. And also something with which I want to conclude with is something she said is that we should voices and try to include everybody, every sector in conservation, and try to make it possible for everybody to be a contributing part to conservation of the Alps. But because otherwise we are at a stage right now where we are actually in the 6th mass extinction event, and the Alps are also. And so we have to include everybody, every sector to make it possible to contribute. So if there is nothing else or nobody else who wants to contribute now, I'm closing the session right now, and we will discuss about the message tomorrow. We will try to include everything that has been mentioned right now and try to redraft the message and try to finalize it tomorrow. And right now we are going to have the dinner, which is about 10 minutes before 7 downstairs. So if, yeah, Lorenz. Yes, please. We still have time.
I only wanted to add something to the thing that was said before about cohabiting spaces. Like, I think that some spaces should be like taken over almost only by nature, but I think it should not be like separated spaces where only nature is and humans are like I don't think that landscapes should be separated in human spaces and nature spaces, but still they should interact. So nature should come into the human spaces, and also humans should come into nature spaces, but of course with the right respect and with the right behaviors, of course. Like for example, as we've seen this morning, there should be no motocross drivers in Rete Natura 2000 areas, but perhaps like walking with the right behavior would still be something good, so people can still learn from nature and interact with it with the right behaviors, of course. Because I think it's really important that we don't lose the connection to nature, and that nature and humankind are always very interconnected. And then very last thing is, I've seen on one of the slides there was the question if putting seedlings of plant species which are endangered by extinction, if it is a good practice to combat biodiversity loss. I think it can be, but of course, it's not a solution if we don't create the necessary conditions for this species which are going extinct to prosper. Because like if we don't combat and mitigate climate change and the habitats which these endangered species need is not guaranteed and are not protected. So if we lose these habitats, then it doesn't make sense to plant these seedlings because they would not survive in any case. So if we don't tackle the problem at its roots, so combating and mitigating also climate change and preserving the habitats, then of course we can also not stop biodiversity loss.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. And I will take it as closing words from you, and hope you have a good evening and see you at the networking dinner or tomorrow. So have a nice evening. Thank you very much for your contribution.